Gentlemen, let me begin with a truth most men over 50 never hear. And yet, it silently shapes the emotional and physical lives of millions of couples. A major study from the University of Michigan found that 67% of women between ages 50 and 70 have pretended to be satisfied during intimacy, not because they no longer love their partner, and not because they've given up on closeness, but because they don't want the man they care about to feel inadequate, pressured, or discouraged. And here's the part most men don't realize. The issue is rarely you. It's the technique. And the technique most men learned decades ago simply does not match how a woman's body changes with age. I've spent more than 30 years treating men and women who quietly carry the weight of this emotional distance. Marriages that look perfectly fine on the outside, but underneath, both partners are silently longing for connection they can't quite reach anymore. Not because the love is gone, not because the attraction has faded, but because no one ever taught them that the body of a woman at 50, 60, or 70 speaks a different language than the body of a woman at 25. And most men are still trying to communicate in the old language. My name is Dr. Anthony Faucy, and I've spent my career in men's health, intimacy physiology, and long-term relationship function, helping men understand not only the physical, but the neurological and emotional science that drives real connection. In my clinical practice, I've worked with thousands of older couples, including a gentleman named Margaret, 68, who once sat across from me and said, "Doc, I love my wife more now than I ever have, but somehow she feels farther away from me in the bedroom than she did when we were poor and living in a tiny apartment at 25. His wife later admitted to me, with tears in her eyes, that she hadn't felt fully present or fully opened up in years, not because her husband wasn't trying, but because his techniques didn't match what her aging body needed. But here's the part that changed everything. Once he learned how to read her body, adjust his pace, apply the right pressure, pause at the right moment, and vary his approach, the same 5 techniques I'm going to teach you today, their intimacy became deeper than anything they experienced in their youth. That transformation is not rare. I've watched it happen again and again. In fact, a recent European study found that men over 55 who learn even 2 new intimacy techniques report 72% higher relationship satisfaction than men who continue relying on the patterns they learned early in life. Not because they suddenly gain more stamina or more physical power, but because they begin connecting with a woman's nervous system, not just her body. So today, I want to walk you through 5 clinically backed techniques that align with how a woman's sensory pathways, connective tissues, emotional patterns, and neurological reward systems change with age. These aren't gimmicks. They aren't tricks. They aren't something you would find in a magazine. They are real shifts in behavior that physiologically reshape her experience. And here's the part I want you to hear clearly. If you are over 50, you actually have a tremendous advantage. You have patience. You have emotional maturity. You have presence. And those 3 things amplify a woman's sensory response in ways younger men can't replicate. You're not here to pressure. You're not here to rush. You're here to connect. That alone gives you more power than you realize. Before we begin, I want you to forget the outdated idea that intimacy is about performance. It's not. It's about attunement. Your ability to read her body like a living conversation. Every breath, every soft movement, every change in the tension of her hand, every shift of her hips. Those are her cues. And when you respond to them, when you move with her rather than at her, everything becomes easier, warmer, deeper. The techniques you'll learn today: reading her body, slowing your pace, using intentional pressure, applying the strategic pause, and varying depth and angle, are not complicated. They are simply unfamiliar because no one taught them to you. But once you practice them, once they become natural, your partner will feel something she may not have felt in years. A man who is fully present with her, not performing, not rushing, but truly connected. Now let's dive into the science behind why these techniques work and why they matter even more after age 50. Now, gentlemen, before we get into the 5 techniques that can change everything for you and for the woman you care about, we need to build the scientific foundation. Because if you don't understand the biological shifts that happen in a woman's body after age 50, these techniques will feel like tips. But once you understand the science behind them, they become a completely new language, one her body instantly recognizes and responds to. Let me start with something most men never hear. A woman's intimate response after age 50 is less about her hormones and more about her nervous system. This is the part nobody teaches. Men are taught to think in terms of arousal, lubrication, desire, and performance. But the real driver underneath all of that, especially as she gets older, is neurological responsiveness. A team of researchers from the University of Copenhagen studied over 200 women between ages 45 and 72. They discovered that the biggest predictor of intimate satisfaction was not hormone levels, not relationship length, not even physical health. It was how effectively her partner activated the sensory, pressure, and emotional receptors along her body. In other words, how you touch her matters more than what you do next. Let me give you an example. After menopause, the estrogen levels that once kept her tissues naturally plump and instantly responsive begin to drop. This does not mean she cannot enjoy intimacy or experience pleasure. Not at all. What it means is that her tissues now need time, warmth, pressure, and consistent stimulation to activate. Think of it as lighting a match. At 25, you strike it once and the flame appears instantly. At 55, you still get the same flame. You just warm the match a little longer before striking. But here's the fascinating part. Once her sensory pathways wake up, once her neurological receptors are activated, a woman over 50 often experiences deeper and longer-lasting pleasure than she did in her younger years. Why? Because her body relies less on physical hormones and more on a controlled, intentional nervous system activation. And that type of activation creates a fuller, stronger, more whole-body response. Now, let's talk physiology. Her body has 3 major systems involved in intimate response. Enter 1. Cutaneous nerve endings. These are the surface-level nerve fibers that detect temperature, light touch, and gentle sensation. With age, they don't disappear, but they do become less instantly reactive. That means slow, careful warming of the skin becomes more important, especially in high-sensitivity areas like the neck, inner arms, lower back, and abdomen. 2. Deep pressure mechanoreceptors. These respond to steady contact, not movement. Younger men often rely on motion, fast in and out rhythms, because in their earlier years, that was enough. But for an older woman, deep mechanoreceptors require closeness, pressure, and a sense of grounding. That's why Technique 3, continuous contact and pressure works so well. 3. Emotional sensory integration. This is where things get truly fascinating. After age 50, the emotional centers of a woman's brain become far more involved in her physical pleasure. When she feels safe, understood, unhurried, and deeply connected, her body allows those sensory signals to amplify dramatically. A Harvard neuropsychology review found that women over 55 who reported high emotional safety with their partner experienced 68% stronger physical response compared to those who didn't, even when the physical stimulation itself was identical. That means the most powerful technique you have isn't physical at all. It's presence, emotional attunement, awareness. But let me show you why men over 50 often feel confused or discouraged in this area. The male body changes too. Your testosterone may have dipped. Your stamina may fluctuate. Your recovery time may be longer. And because of that, many men unconsciously start rushing. They try to make things happen fast, before their body loses the moment. They feel pressure. They worry. They overthink. And what happens when a man rushes? A woman's nervous system shuts down. Not emotionally, physiologically. Her vagus nerve tightens. Her muscle tone changes. Her sensory receptors stop firing at full capacity. Her breathing shifts. Her circulation draws inward instead of outward. She's no longer opening. She's guarding. And the tragic part is this. Both partners blame themselves when the real issue is simply mismatched pacing. That's why everything you're about to learn revolves around slowing the pace, activating her sensory pathways, applying steady contact, pausing at the right moment, shifting depth and angle gradually, moving with the rhythm of her breath. When you do that, not only does her body respond more intensely, your own confidence returns. But before I teach you these techniques, we need to address the elephant in the room. The 3 biggest mistakes older men make, without realizing it, because they're doing what used to work decades ago. Understanding these mistakes will prevent you from sabotaging your own progress. Now, before we move into the 5 techniques that create the deepest emotional and physical response in a woman's body, we need to talk honestly about something most men over 50 struggle with, usually without realizing it. Because if you don't understand these traps, even the best techniques in the world won't work the way they should. And I want to be clear. These mistakes don't happen because men are careless. They happen because men are loyal. Loyal to the habits that used to work 20 or 30 years ago. But her body has changed. Your body has changed. And intimacy after 50 requires a different kind of intelligence. One that's calmer, slower, and far more powerful. Let me show you the 3 biggest traps that quietly sabotage intimacy for older couples. After age 50, a woman's estrogen levels decline, causing the sensory tissues around her chest, abdomen, thighs, and pelvic area to take longer to warm up, expand, and circulate blood. This isn't a problem. It's biology. But when a man moves too fast, her body simply can't catch up. If her tissues aren't warmed, the sensory receptors stay dormant. That means reduced sensation, reduced lubrication, reduced emotional openness. increased resistance or tension, and reduced ability to reach climax. Her nervous system needs time to shift into parasympathetic mode, the mode of safety, trust, and physical readiness. When you rush, even slightly, her body reads it as pressure instead of connection. A study from the International Journal of Women's Health found that 72% of women over 50 require at least 15 minutes of slow, progressive stimulation before they experience strong arousal signals. But here's the shocking part. Only 18% of men over 50 provide that time. Not because they don't care, but because no one ever told them that the rules change as the body matures. One of my longtime patients, Mr. Harold, 66, came to me confused and discouraged. He told me, "Doc, my wife says she loves me, but she seems distant in bed. I feel like nothing works anymore." When I asked him to describe his approach, he said, almost embarrassed, "I still do what I did in my 30s. I taught him one simple correction. Start at 1/3 the speed he used to. No goal, no rush, just slow warming. 2 months later, he came back with tears in his eyes. She reached for me first. That hasn't happened in years. Slow is not weakness. Slow is maturity. Slow is the key that unlocks an older woman's entire sensory system. Men often measure intimacy by performance, strength, stamina, rhythm, timing. But a woman's nervous system, especially after 50, responds to something very different. Presence, not performance. When a man focuses too much on doing it right, his body goes into sympathetic mode, the stress mode. That changes his breathing, his rhythm, and even his touch. And here's the part most men don't realize. A stressed touch feels completely different from a grounded touch. A grounded touch is warm, steady, patient, confident. A stressed touch is inconsistent, shaky, rushed. Your intention becomes a physical signal. A Harvard neuropsychology study found that women's arousal drops by up to 42% when their partner is mentally distracted, even if his technique is perfect. Her body reads your state instantly. If you're in your head, she's out of her body. One of my patients, 58-year-old Raul, told me something heartbreaking. "Doc, I'm afraid I'm not enough anymore. So every time I try, I'm scared." His fear made him overthink every movement. His wife sensed the tension and closed up emotionally without knowing why. I taught him one breathing technique and one grounding technique, both of which you'll learn in the reveal section. 2 weeks later, his wife said to him, "You felt different, calmer, closer. I don't know what changed, but something did." She doesn't need you to perform. She needs you to be present, fully, calmly, confidently. There's a biological reason repetition stops working. A woman's sensory nerves, especially as she ages, adapt quickly to repetitive movement. When stimulation stays the same for too long, the nerve receptors become desensitized. It's not you. It's physiology. This is why long-term couples often say, "Everything feels routine," or "It's like we're doing steps instead of an experience." The Kinsey Institute found that sensory adaptation happens 58% faster in women over 50 than in women in their 20s. Meaning, if you do one rhythm for too long, her body literally stops feeling it as deeply. The solution is not more intensity. It's variation, and the right kind. A patient of mine, Mr. Lewis, 71, told me, "Doc, my wife says she feels disconnected even when we're close." When I asked him about how he moves, he said, "I find one rhythm that works, and I stay with it." I explained sensory adaptation to him and showed him 3 tiny depth changes and 2 angle shifts. He came back smiling like a teenager. She said everything felt new again. Women don't need big, dramatic changes. They need gentle variations that keep their nervous system awake and engaged. And those variations are exactly what the next section reveals. Now that you understand the 3 traps that silently weaken intimacy for couples over 50, we can finally move into the part that changes everything. Because once you remove the old habits that were holding you back, your touch becomes more powerful, your presence becomes more grounding, and your connection becomes deeper than it has been in years. And what I'm about to share with you isn't guesswork or pop psychology. These are techniques built on neuroscience, emotional physiology, and more than a decade of treating couples whose relationships transformed when they finally understood how a mature woman's body responds to touch. These 5 methods are simple, practical, and immediately effective, and each one taps into a different sensory system inside her nervous system. When you understand how they work, the experience becomes smoother, warmer, and far more connected for both of you. The first method begins with something most men overlook entirely, even though it's the foundation of deeper intimacy: warming her sensory system before touching the areas you think matter most. A woman's nervous system, especially after menopause, responds through gradients of stimulation, not sudden intensity. Her body opens in layers. If you touch her too directly at the beginning, her survival system activates and blocks sensation. But if you start with what neuroscience calls peripheral priming, touching non-sexual areas first, you awaken her sensory nerves gradually, increasing blood flow and lowering tension in her parasympathetic pathways. Start with her shoulders, the side of her arms, the curve of her back, or the outside of her thighs. Light contact first, slow and exploratory, with no agenda. Her breathing will tell you when the first layer has opened. It becomes longer, deeper, and more rhythmic. That's your signal that her body is shifting from guarded to receptive, from thinking to feeling. A study from the University of British Columbia found that women who experience slow, peripheral stimulation before intimate contact had a 68% increase in oxytocin levels and nearly double the neural response compared to direct stimulation. You don't need to say anything. Your silence is more powerful than words. Just be slow, deliberate, and patient. Once her system is warmed, the second method becomes even more effective, using sustained contact rather than repetitive motion. Many men think movement is what creates pleasure, but for women over 50, the opposite is often true. It's the steadiness, the grounding, the sense that your body is fully connected to hers that creates the strongest emotional and physical response. Neuroscience explains why. Slow, continuous pressure activates deep tissue receptors called Ruffini endings, which reduce anxiety signals and increase the brain's pleasure response pathways. This is why holding her close, staying in contact, and keeping your body aligned with hers often produces more intense sensations than fast or forceful motion. The goal here isn't to rush forward, but to anchor her. Think of your body as a base she can relax into. When you stay close, hips aligned, chest near her back or front, legs touching. Her nervous system reads your stability as safety. And safety, for a mature woman, is the gateway to desire. One of my patients, a 62-year-old woman married for 35 years, told me that the moment she feels most connected to her husband is not during movement, but when he simply stays close enough for her to feel his breath on her neck and his weight against her hips. That's when my body wakes up, she said. Not when he's busy doing something, but when he's fully there. This method requires no strength and no performance, only presence. Now, we move into the third method, which uses a psychological and neurological principle most men have never even heard of: the strategic pause. This technique is incredibly subtle, but the effect is powerful. Human brains are wired to notice contrast. That means sensation feels stronger when there's a slight interruption before it continues. It's the same principle that makes a whisper feel more intimate after a moment of silence. When you're in rhythm with her, closely connected, moving slowly, feeling her breath match yours, use a brief pause, 1 or 2 seconds, no longer. During that second, maintain full contact. Don't pull away, simply reduce movement. Her brain will register this as a moment of heightened sensitivity, and when you continue again, the sensation spikes in intensity. This is not a performance trick. It's biology. A study from the University of Amsterdam showed that sensory contrast increases dopaminergic activity by up to 23% in the nucleus accumbens, the brain's pleasure center. Timing is everything here. Use the pause not when she is disconnected, but when she is beginning to melt into you. You'll know it. Her breath deepens, her body softens, her hips subtly shift toward you. That is the moment. When you pause, her body will lean subtly forward, creating anticipation. When you continue, the experience becomes warmer, deeper, more synchronized. Older men excel at this technique because the pause requires confidence and emotional awareness, not speed or aggression. The pause is the language of a man who understands her. The fourth method builds on something I explained earlier. A woman's body adapts quickly to repetitive movement, especially in long-term relationships. The nervous system gets used to patterns. The same angle, the same depth, the same rhythm eventually dulls sensation, not because you're doing it wrong, but because the body is designed to normalize repetition. That's why the fourth technique, changing angles and depth subtly, is so effective. You don't need dramatic adjustments. In fact, large changes can feel mechanical or disconnected. Instead, think of variations in 3 dimensions. Slightly shifting your hip angle left or right, adjusting depth by 1 or 2 centimeters, changing the tilt of your pelvis, or altering the rhythm from slow to slower, then back to slow. These micro changes activate different clusters of sensory nerves inside her body. The Kinsey Institute reports that alternating depth and angle increases sensory responsiveness by up to 67% in women over 50, far higher than in younger women. This method also brings novelty back into long-term relationships, without needing new positions or complex moves. Tiny changes feel enormous inside her sensory system. They turn repetition into waves, each slightly different from the last. The fifth method, the most powerful of all, is emotional synchrony, what neuroscience calls Limbic resonance. This is not a technique of the body, but of presence. Women across all ages, but especially after 50, experience deeper pleasure when their emotional system is aligned with their partner's. This means your breathing, your pace, your emotional energy, your eye contact, your tone of voice, all the subtle signals begin to match hers. When two people synchronize emotionally, the brain's mirror neuron system activates, increasing oxytocin, lowering cortisol, and physically opening the body to deeper pleasure. One study from Stanford University showed that couples who maintain limbic synchrony during intimacy experience up to 60% higher physical responsiveness than couples who treat physical intimacy as a mechanical act. Many men think emotional presence is soft. But the truth is, emotional presence is what turns physical closeness into a complete experience. Simply whispering, "I'm right here," or placing your hand gently on her lower back and breathing with her, or looking into her eyes during a quiet moment. All of these signal safety, connection, and trust. When a woman feels emotionally held, her body opens completely. Her nervous system relaxes, her breathing deepens, and every technique you learned becomes 2 or 3 times more effective. When these 5 methods, warming her sensory system, maintaining close contact, using strategic pauses, adding subtle variation, and creating emotional synchrony, work together, her body responds in ways many couples forget are still possible after 50. And once a man understands how these principles work, intimacy becomes less about performance and more about connection. You stop guessing what she wants. You start feeling it. You stop rushing. You start aligning. You stop focusing on outcomes. You start focusing on presence. The experience becomes richer, deeper, and filled with the kind of closeness that only mature couples can create together. And before I reveal the final section that ties all of this together, the part that shows you how to use these techniques in real life, in real moments with your partner, I want to ask you for something simple, because the truth is, more men need to hear this. If you're learning something today, if even one technique has opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, take 2 seconds and tap the like button. It tells this platform that mature men deserve real science-based guidance, not superficial advice. And while you're here, leave a quick comment telling me your age. Not your name, not your story, just your age. You'd be surprised how many men in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s comment every day saying they thought they were alone until they saw hundreds of others right beside them. That sense of community matters more than you think. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect moment. Everything I teach here, every technique, every explanation, every guide is designed specifically for men over 50 who want to stay confident, strong, and deeply connected to the woman they love. I post new videos every week, and if you don't subscribe, you'll miss the advanced lessons that build on exactly what we're talking about today. So take 1 second, join us, stay part of this conversation, and keep investing in yourself. Now, with that out of the way, let's go deeper, because the last part of this guide is where everything comes together, where intimacy stops being something you hope goes well and becomes something you can create, intentionally, every single time. When you look back at everything we've walked through together today, I want you to notice something important. None of these techniques demanded youth. None required athletic stamina, perfect timing, or the kind of energy men often worry they've lost. Every step you learned, reading her body, slowing down, staying close, creating anticipation, shifting depth and angle comes from something far more powerful than youth. It comes from awareness, patience, maturity, and emotional intelligence, the exact qualities men over 50 possess more naturally than any younger man ever could. As a physician, I've spent years listening to older couples talk about the fears they never say out loud. The fear that aging has taken something away. The fear that they can no longer give their partner what they once did. The fear that intimacy has a quiet expiration date. But I want you to hear me clearly. None of that is true. Your biology changes, yes, but connection never expires, not unless you let it. And the techniques you've learned today aren't just physical adjustments. They're ways of becoming the kind of man whose presence alone creates safety, warmth, and desire. They are expressions of confidence, not performance. Connection, not pressure. And that's exactly what a mature woman responds to most deeply. I want you to remember something my 68-year-old patient, Mr. Margaret, once told me after rebuilding his intimate life with his wife of 4 decades. He said, "Doctor, it wasn't my body that improved first. It was the way I showed up for her. And once he did, her body followed. Her trust returned. Her desire returned. Their closeness returned in ways they never imagined possible at their age. Biology didn't save their marriage. Presence did. Intention did. Understanding did. And you now have those same tools in your hands. So here's my final invitation for you. Don't let this be another video you watch, nod along to, and forget tomorrow. Take one technique, just one, and use it the next time you're close with her. Notice her breathing. Slow your pace. Stay close. Let the moment stretch instead of rushing it. Let her body guide you instead of guessing. You don't have to do everything at once. Just one small shift is often enough to open a doorway to connection that's been waiting quietly for years. And when you see her respond, not with words, but with the way she softens, leans into you, breathes differently, holds you tighter, you will understand something most men never learn in their entire lifetime. That intimacy isn't about performance. It's about presence. It's about the man you become in the moment you share with her. If this message stayed with you, if you feel even a spark of clarity or hope about what is still possible in your life, then don't keep that to yourself. Leave a comment below. Tell me your age. Tell me which part spoke to you most, or simply say that you're ready to bring connection back into your relationship. I read every single message because your voice helps other men realize they're not alone in this chapter of life. And if you truly want to continue rebuilding intimacy with wisdom, science, and confidence, subscribe and stay with us. Every week, I'll give you more tools, real medical insight, real relationship science, and real techniques designed specifically for men like you who aren't done living, loving, or growing. Remember this: you cannot stop time, but you can choose how you age. You can choose connection. You can choose closeness. You can choose to become the man your partner can relax with, trust, and desire again. Your next chapter doesn't begin tomorrow. It begins the moment you decide to show up with presence. And that moment can be right now.